right. Talk to you all later.
With this first 3 days, defensively, how's it going for you?
It's okay. I mean, the first 2 days you're in helmets, and we're in split squad practices to maximize reps, maximize teaching, which I think is outstanding for the players. And this was the first day for our entire group. So we're in shells because the NCAA rules today and tomorrow, and then pads on Saturday. But again, you know, I'm pretty somewhat pleased, I guess, with where we are. Not enough consistency mentally, physically. I haven't watched the tape yet, so it's hard for me to really single anybody out, and I can't stand to single anybody out in helmets. So it is what it is. It's where we are, and we've got to continue to move forward.
Well, what's with Blake showing up? I know T-Rod talked about
What's that now?
with Blake Countess showing up now.
Yeah.
T-Rod talked about that the expectation eventually will be most likely for Josh to move inside. We've seen them both inside of that nickel spot. What are your thoughts right now?
Well, right now we're not setting on anything. It's way too early to even think about that. Right now, we're training our guys for the season. We're training our guys for multiple spots because at the end of the day, we've got to get the best 4 or 5 or 6 DBs on the field at one time, and we're trying to expose as much as we can to our players at this point. When we start narrowing down after practice 17, 18, 19, that's really where you start getting guys in slots and saying this is where we need to be with this guy. But Blake is a guy that gives you a different skill set from can play inside as a nickel, can play outside as a corner, and also has safety instincts as far as playing the deep ball in the part of the field. Seems to be a willing tackler, but a guy that's got a lot of experience and is extremely bright.
What are your thoughts on your strategy with the younger guys, the newcomers, the freshmen, just kind of having them stand, watch, digest, and kind of learn as much as they can?
Well, I believe that you can get mental reps. I believe you can watch film through that. We all learn differently. Some guys can and some guys can't. But you can digest if you're willing to pay attention and look at some of those things. Now, there's no question taking a full rep is much better. There's no question about that. And some guys struggle in the classroom as far as in a classroom setting, going over things and watching films. They need to walk through it. So everybody learns differently, and I think I told the defensive staff today or yesterday, we've got to identify how they learn, and there's certainly some young guys that are going to help us. It's way too early to tell, so I know that's the next question. But again, those guys are sponges. They're trying to learn everything they can learn. We're trying to break it down in concepts in the best way to teach them so they can go be functional for us at this time and continue to build every single day. And certainly we've seen some guys that have done some nice things.
So they've worked against each other.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the split squad practice. The second practice is a little slower pace because of teaching, which it should be. But it's the same scripts. It's the same practice. There's no difference in the practice. It's not a punishment to go in that group. It just comes down to reps, and you want to get guys as many turns and reps. So on day one, instead of having 15 guys in a line, you got 8. And those 7 in the afternoon are getting quality reps. And if you do it as an entire unit, sometimes it's hard to get all of those guys the reps they need.
So you've actually had 2 practices, identical practices, one for the
they're identical.
One for those guys.
Absolutely.
And one for the younger guys.
A little shorter because we don't necessarily have the numbers in the second group, but it's an identical practice. It's no difference. If you had walked out there, other than seeing some of the girth and size and numbers, you wouldn't have known any difference.
We'll just look at your guys as a group. You think everybody's in pretty good shape and ready to go?
Yeah, I think Ryan Russell and our strength staff do a fantastic job, and I think our guys are in pretty good shape. I think that Pee Wee coming off the knee, we got to be careful with him in camp from a standpoint of he's right at I believe 8 months out, 7 months out. And with a big guy, we just got to make sure he's carrying 280 pounds. We've been smart with him. But other than that, Jamel President had a little bit of a procedure on his groin, I believe, in May, so it slowed him down a little bit. But he's doing everything. He's fine. But I'm just saying those are the only 2 guys to me that jump out, and a little bit of Jonathan Jones with the foot as far as conditioning from summer. They're all clear. They're all full go. They're all practicing right now. The other guys are a little ahead of them because they were limited in the summer on the defensive side of the ball. So But I'm very pleased with, the third practice of the conditioning of the team.
How
Was it
nice.
helpful? I was gonna say, was it helpful that all your guys, all your signings were able to either get in January or mostly fairly early in the summer?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is the earliest, because of the school calendar, that anywhere I've ever been that we had the freshmen in May. And I've never been around that. And that's a huge benefit for them because they get an entire 2 months of training before this. Normally, the situations I've been in, it's mid to late June. So really, they only have 1 month. And really, the first couple of weeks are somewhat of an orientation in the weight room, football-wise. So they get, talking in terms of another 4 weeks to train. And that's really good.
Well, talking about having Carl, you had him in the spring, and he's able to turn it loose now. What does that bring to the table for you guys?
Well, I think the number one thing, you got a really good edge rusher. A guy you got to account for in the rush, number one. Number two, you got a guy on the field that plays with a high motor and affects everybody else. And that's something you got to understand that affects your football team. When a guy like that goes out and performs at a high level, certainly is one of our leaders, and you're able to take examples of how hard he plays on the film, that says a lot from a coach's standpoint.
He said that he really wanted to get reps in the scrimmages, felt like he needed it. Do you feel the same way, that he needs to get live reps?
Yeah,
having
he did in the
so
fall,
long?
and he didn't in the spring. He thought he did.
Will, a guy comes in at 277 pounds, bound calorie, can he still fit in at that butt position, or do you?
Sure,
think
he's
more-
athletic enough. It's not really the weight, it's just what can you carry and what can you do athletically. And certainly, right now, he can play end or butt for us. So that's kind of where we're training him, more at end right now. But, he certainly could be a guy that's athletic enough to do those things, certainly, yeah.
Who are you looking at the linebacker portion of the nickel / strong linebacker spot?
The Mike and Will.
No, the other one, the strong linebacker.
The nickel,
Yeah.
well, we're not really looking at a linebacker. We plan on covering somebody in the slot.
So I know when it's a nickel, but don't you sometimes play a linebacker kind of guy there?
Not really,
Okay.
unless we don't have anybody else.
Who would that be?
What's that?
Who would that be?
Well, it's a combination of guys. Tim Irvin is rep there. Josh is rep there. Blake is rep there. Jeremiah Denson is rep there. And we could look at a big nickel situation outside with like a Justin Garrett or a Jeff Holland. Some other things we talked about. Maybe that's what you were.
That's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
You're talking over my head again.
Garrett's a guy who's been battling injuries every year. I know he's healthy now. What do you think is his potential if he keeps healthy?
I think he has a lot of potential. I think he's an interesting guy because athletically, he's an explosive young man. He's smart. He studies the game. He works hard at it. He worked extremely hard in all season. The 7th practices, I believe, when he injured his ankle in spring, he was having a fantastic spring. And he's really competing for playing time. We've been alternating him and Casanova and Trey Williams and Chris Frost. All those guys are kind of alternating right now. Nobody's separating themselves, and all 4 guys are doing a pretty good job. Very pleased with Darrell Williams, a young player, who's come in and done some nice things for us. So we're kind of in that mix right now, just continue. Again, we're day 3 now. Let's don't go out of the presses here and go nuts. Let's understand we're in day 3.
The secondary seems to be just off the field a closer group than they have been. A lot of that's just they're in the same meeting room now. They're dyeing their hair the same color. What have you noticed from those guys and how close they've got?
Based on their hairstyles, I think we could sit down and have a talk. They can do a lot for you, I can tell you.
I know.
But, you really couldn't dye anything, could you?
I can shave it and that's about it.
But I really think the 2 closest knit groups in your football team need to be your offensive line and your secondary, because they break down there the other band's playing. And we need those guys to be very close. We need those guys, especially our seniors. You look at Blake Countess, I know he's new to Auburn, but he started 30 games at Michigan. It's an outstanding program. You look at Josh Holmes, he's played a lot of football. Jonathan Jones has played a lot of football. Trey Matthews started as a true freshman, so he's played snaps. Rudy Ford was a starter last year. And then we got a bunch of young guys coming. And I think as much as anything, what I've seen, those guys have done a really good job of coaching the younger players. And, it says a lot about your system, your scheme, and your leadership when those guys are able to do that.
Given your lack of depth in the secondary, and we've seen with the second unit so far in the early portion of practice, you had Sherwood and Hood out there with the second unit. How likely?
Well, that was in split squad.
Just, yeah, but for.
So that's not a full
But
way
given
to
that
look
lack
at
of
it.
depth and you're moving Roberts over to safety,
Mhm.
I know you're very high on the freshman, but to start the season for the Open, how likely is it, do you say at this point, that you could turn to a Michael Sherwood in that third or fourth quarter capacity?
We're gonna do what we gotta do to win games. You know, our track record at Florida, we played some freshmen down there and they're pretty good. They're real good. So we don't worry about that. The further your position is away from the ball, the easier it is to play as a freshman. Because your athleticism takes over more than it is when you're gonna play defensive tackle. And it's a much faster, bigger, complex game inside. You know, it's easier. I'm not saying it's easy. Nothing of this is easy. But I'm saying that if you want to go play wide out as a freshman, if you want to play running back as a freshman, it's more of an instinctive position as opposed to playing in the offensive line or playing a defensive tackle or playing a linebacker. There's a lot more on your plate as far as the complexity of the game, the size, the speed, and we've played a lot of freshmen where we've been and we've had a great success doing it.
Those young guys in the secondary, what do you look for in them before you put the pads on these first couple of days?
Well, I think more than anything, what they're able to retain from the meeting room, to the walkthrough, to the practice, what they're able to retain from that day to the next day, because that's part of your evaluation as a coach is, you know, we're going to get into game 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, and all of a sudden we change our schemes and how we're doing some things. We change a pattern match and what we're going to do. How well are they able to adjust? How well are they able to change? We're going to continue to install every day. How are they able to handle the multiple of things that are going to happen, the motions from the offense, the shifts, the personnel changes, the speed of the game. You know, all of that stuff is a huge evaluation piece and how they handle those things. And then, you know, that's a huge part of the evaluation on top of the athleticism and the physicality you got to play the game with.
Well, you've been on championship teams in this league, and just from a talent standpoint, when you look at your defense, do you have that kind of talent
Sure.
to win a
Yeah,
championship?
we'll be all right. We'll be fine.
Well, at the end of the spring, you said you felt like you had 4 linebackers that you at least identified through Connell, Trey, Casanova, Chris, and Justin. And you said after that we need to find the depth behind them. What do you think is a reasonable timetable in the fall to find that?
Well, I think is in my experience in this league, the way it's headed, because you're playing so much nickel, you know, by matching up on the personnels and the different things. Now, the West is a little different because of some of the two-back teams you're going to face. So we need to be able to find an end-of-the-line Sam backer and some of that, and we're still working through that. But you can make it through the year with 5 linebackers and be fine. Done it. You know, you really could make it through with 4 if you've got a swing guy. But at the end of the day, I'd like to have more, and we're just not ready to say that right now. We got some guys that I think have the ability to, but they've got to show more consistency in their performance.
Well,
Initially, what's the plan with Jeffrey Holland? Where do you think you're going to start him? What do you
Jeffrey's playing Sam in regular, and then he's playing some Buck in sub situations to rush. He's got some natural pass rush skills that we knew about a long time ago, but he's a guy that can do some different things for him, for us. And we just got to, you know, again, being a new player, how much is he going to be able to handle in a relatively short time to get ready for September 5th and the season? But he's certainly a guy that athletically can help us.
Can you be an end-of-the-line Sam?
Yes.
well, with expectations being what they are for this program as a whole, for you, obviously among the fan base, and everybody knows your resume, what you've done previously, how do you define success for your defense this year? What will be a successful year for you?
Just winning the SEC, and then you're probably in the Final Four.
Do defense?
I don't get into stats and all that. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, that's great. That probably may help in recruiting. At the end of the day, it's about doing what you got to do to win football games. And if you win 3-0, that's just as good if you win 41-40. It really is. And I know people don't think I think that way, but I do. It's about winning games and do what you got to do to win games.
Has it become more that way for defense coordinators in general with all these high-powered offenses around scoring so many points, do you think?
Well, it's always been about winning for me. I can't comment for anybody else. It's just do what we got to do to win.
You mentioned playing the freshmen, which you're obviously going to have to do in the secondary. What is the desired percentage of reps for the starters, for seniors, who obviously you're going to have to lean on heavily, where last year, for instance, we saw the starting linebackers play, I think, over 85% of snaps. So is there a number that you say is just too high for Jones to be out there, just too many percentage?
Are you talking in terms of fall camp?
No, for once the season rolls around.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, if he's one of our top 2 corners, and we don't feel comfortable about another guy, we're going to figure that out, and he's going to have to be in really good shape. Now, it's practice 3 again, so we have a long time before those decisions are made. You know, I love to be in a situation where you had 4 or 5 corners you felt great about, and some of the heat, especially early in the year, and some of the day games we're going to be playing here, the second game of the year at 11 o'clock, and down in Baton Rouge at 2:30. I mean, there's going to be some heat involved, and we're going to have to be prepared to have those young men ready to play. And so, you know, again, I always revert back to what you've done before. There's been a bunch of freshmen that have played for us before. It's not an issue. We're going to get those guys ready to play. We're going to get them ready to play in a championship manner, and that's what we look forward to doing.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, y'all take care.